Once upon a tall tale. The Legend of Cinnamon Libby by Morgan Olson. Once upon a tall tale. Season 0, Episode 2. Now, if you grew up in this country, you know how it works. 50 kingdoms, 50 castles, 50 crowns, and a king or queen or whatever in each one ruling by right of whoever got there first. The turnpike's a tournament ground 6 weekends a year. The tolls are tribute. If you want to drive from Camden to Newark, you better have a passport, a prayer, and a full tank of gas. Because the King of New Jersey's knights stop every car, and if your shield ain't paid up, you're walking. But you might not know about Cinnamon Libby. Most don't. The king she embarrassed paid good money to leave her out of the books. So sit down, pour yourself something brown. Let me tell it. Cinnamon Libby was born in the pine Barrens of South Jersey, in a town called Hammonton. On a night so hot the chickens laid hard-boiled eggs and the Jersey Devil came out of the trees just to fan himself. Her mama took one look at that red-faced, hollering baby and said, "Mercy, this child's got a fire in her." She wasn't wrong. By age 4, Libby had set 3 barns ablaze just by getting cross at a rooster. By age 7, she'd boiled a creek dry, shouting at a bullfrog. By age 12, she could light a cigarette by glaring at it, which is a useful skill but a hard one to explain to your priest. Her hair was the color of cinnamon dipped in cayenne, which is how she got the name. Her eyes were green like a thundercloud thinking it over. She was 5'0" in boots, but the boots were her daddy's, and when she walked across a wood floor, it sounded like a draft horse with opinions. The Barrens were nobody's land. The King of New Jersey claimed them on his maps, but his knights wouldn't ride into them. Too many bogs, too many bears, too many old women who'd lived alone too long and gotten strange. It was the kind of place where you could grow up wild, and Libby did. She knew which mushrooms killed you, and which ones just made you see your dead grandmother. She knew which roads doubled back on themselves. She knew the song the pines made when a storm was coming, and she could whistle it back to scare the storm off. What she did not know, on the morning her phone first rang, was that anybody had her number. It was a Tuesday, and I know it was Tuesday because Tuesdays are when Libby cleaned out the smokehouse. And she was elbow deep in pig fat when her flip phone started buzzing on the workbench. Now Libby didn't have a phone plan. Libby didn't have service. The Pine Barrens didn't get bars, but the phone was buzzing all the same, and when she flipped it open, 3 women were already arguing on the line. "I'm telling you, she's ready. We should go. We should be moving. Mickey, listen, you can't just throw a child at a war and..." "She's not a child, she's 22. She's a child to us, Cat." "Hello," said Libby. The line went silent. Then the first voice, gravelly, like a woman who'd smoked since the Spanish-American War, said, "Cinnamon Libby, about damn time. This is Mickey." "And Cat," said the second, sharp, East Coast, the kind of voice that read 3 newspapers before breakfast. "And Maggie," said the third, and her voice was so soft Libby had to press the phone to her ear. "Hello, sweetheart." "Who are you?" said Libby. "Friends," said Mickey. "Advisors," said Cat. "Family," said Maggie. "Are you my dead aunts?" said Libby, because her mama had 3 sisters and they'd all gone mysterious within the year. "Sure," said Mickey. "Why not?" "We've got a job for you, sweetheart," said Maggie. And here Mickey took over, and her voice changed, got loud, got bright, got like a brass band warming up. "Cinnamon Libby, the kingdoms are rotten, the kings are cruel, the queens are crueler. The women of this country have been getting the wrong end of the lance for 400 years, and we have decided, we 3, that you're the one to do something about it. You're going to ride. You're going to fight. You're going to make those crowned sons of..." "Mickey," said Maggie. "Those crowned gentlemen answer for what they've done, and you're going to..." "Hold on," said Libby, and her temper started rising the way bread rises, slow and certain. "Hold on, hold on, hold on. You're telling me that my dead aunts have been watching this whole time, and you waited until I was 22 to call?" "Cinnamon Libby," said Maggie. "Where were you when old man Pritchard did what he did? Where were you when the schoolmarm got paid half? Where were you when—" "Cinnamon Libby. When the widow Pemberton lost her house because her husband signed a paper she didn't even—" "Cinnamon Libby, hush." She hushed. Maggie's voice was the only one that did that to her, the only one that ever would. "We were here," said Maggie. "We were always here. The line wasn't open until now." "Why now?" said Libby. "Because you're listening," said Maggie. "Nobody else was." "Will you ride?" Libby looked down at her hands, which were still in pig fat. She looked up at the smokehouse roof, which had a hole in it she'd been meaning to fix. She looked out the door at the pine barrens, which stretched away forever. "Yeah," she said. "Yeah, I'll ride." "Good girl," shouted Mickey, and Libby had to hold the phone away from her ear. Now Libby didn't have armor, so she went down to her daddy's barn and pulled his cast iron skillet off the wall, the big one, the 20-incher, and she lashed it across her chest with bridle leather. She didn't have a helmet, so she took the stew pot. She didn't have greaves, so she wrapped her shins in old license plates. New Jersey license plates, naturally, yellow and black, the colors of the kingdom she was about to embarrass. She didn't have a sword. "You need a sword," said Kat on the phone. "I got a fence post," said Libby. "You need a sword, sweetheart," said Maggie. "There's one waiting for you," said Mickey. "Listen close. There's a chapel in Mount Holly. Behind the altar, under the floor, 6 feet down, there's a sword with 5 rust spots on it shaped like a hand. It's been there 200 years waiting on you." "How do you know?" "Because we put it there," said Mickey. And Kat said Mickey sharply, and Mickey said, "Well, we did." So Libby rode. She rode out of the Barrens on her mule Aggravation, who hated everybody equally, which Libby considered fair. She rode up Route 206 with her skillet on her chest and her stew pot on her head and her fence post across her saddle. People stopped their pickup trucks to stare. A knight of New Jersey in full plate at the Hammonton toll booth took one look at her and let her pass without paying tribute, because he was laughing too hard to remember the words. She got to the chapel in Mount Holly at sundown, kicked open the door, walked up the aisle, pulled up the floorboards behind the altar with her bare hands. She didn't even bring a crowbar, she just ripped them up, and dug down 6 feet through dirt and old bones and one very surprised mole, and there at the bottom was a sword. It had 5 rust spots on it shaped like a hand. She picked it up. It was lighter than the fence post. "Oh," she said. "Oh, yeah." "Told you," said Mickey. Word spreads quick in a kingdom. By the time Libby got to Trenton, the King of New Jersey had heard about the skillet girl with the buried sword, and he sent his herald out to meet her at the castle gate. Now the King of New Jersey at this time was named Charles the Lukewarm on account of his personality. He'd been crowned by accident. There was a thing with his cousin and a horse and a misunderstanding about a will, and he'd been losing a war to the Empress of New York for 6 years running. The Empress had taken Hoboken. She'd taken Jersey City. She had her knights camped in Newark eating his cheesesteaks. Charles the Lukewarm was 3 months from losing his crown, and when Libby walked into his throne room with a fence post over her shoulder and a sword on her hip and a stew pot under her arm, he looked at her like a drowning man looks at a thrown rope. "You," he said. "Are you the one?" "I'm somebody," said Libby. "Tell him yes," said Mickey on the phone. "Tell him carefully yes," said Kat. "Sweetheart, just be polite," said Maggie. "I'm the one," said Libby, "and I got conditions." The king leaned forward. "Name them." 1. The widow Pemberton gets her house back. 2. The schoolmarms get paid the same as the schoolmasters. 3. Any law in the books that says a woman can't own a thing, vote on a thing, or laugh as loud as she pleases, gone. 4. "Done," said the king. "Done, done, done, done. Just take Newark back." 4. I want it in writing. He wrote it. She took Newark back in 11 days. I won't dwell on the battles, friend, because tall tales aren't war stories and you didn't come here for the body count. But know this, Libby rode at the front with her skillet on her chest and her sword in her hand, and behind her came every woman in New Jersey who'd ever been told to sit down. 3,000 by Camden, 8,000 by New Brunswick, 20,000 by the time she crossed into Newark, and the Empress of New York's knights took one look at that crowd and one look at the red-headed girl at the front of it, and remembered they had pressing engagements in Albany. Hoboken came back. Jersey City came back. The Empress sued for peace, and Libby made her sign a paper saying she'd pay the New Jersey schoolmarms back wages for 40 years. And the Empress signed it because Libby was holding a sword in one hand and a skillet in the other, and the look on her face suggested she'd use both. Charles the Lukewarm threw a feast. He gave Libby a medal. He offered her a horse to replace Aggravation, who'd kicked one of the king's footmen and was now in disgrace. Libby refused the horse. She kept the mule. That night, on the phone. "He doesn't mean it," said Kat. "Mean what?" said Libby. "Any of it. The medal. The thanks. He's going to throw you over the second it's convenient." "Kat," said Maggie. "She needs to know, Maggie." "I know," said Libby. "I can tell. He looks at me like I'm a coat he borrowed." "Smart girl," said Mickey. "Here's how it happened. There was a small kingdom, Delaware, making trouble on the southern border. Charles the Lukewarm sent Libby down to handle it, with a force of 200 knights, which was about a tenth of what she needed. She handled it anyway, because she was Cinnamon Libby and she could handle a hurricane with a hand towel. But on the ride back, in a little town called Pennsville, the King of Delaware's men ambushed her. They'd known she was coming. They'd known the road. They'd known the hour. Somebody had told them. They took her in chains to the dungeon under Dover Castle, and they sent a ransom demand to Trenton, 300,000 gold pieces for the return of your champion. Charles the Lukewarm read the letter. Charles the Lukewarm folded the letter. Charles the Lukewarm put the letter in a drawer. And Charles the Lukewarm did nothing. He didn't pay. He didn't negotiate. He didn't send a knight, a messenger, a nasty look. He sat in his castle in Trenton and drank wine, and waited, because, and here's the part that'll cook your blood, he'd decided Libby was getting too popular. The women loved her, the peasants loved her, half his own knights loved her. If she came back from Delaware in glory one more time, she was going to be queen, and he was going to be a footnote, so he let her rot. She rotted for 4 months in that dungeon, and on the morning of the 121st day, the phone rang. She'd kept it under her tongue. She'd hidden it from the guards. She'd charged it on a torch sconce that had a loose wire. She flipped it open. "Cinnamon Libby," said Mickey. "He's not coming." "I know," said Libby. "He was never coming," said Kat. "I know," said Libby. "Sweetheart," said Maggie, "you can break out. You have it in you. You always have." "I know," said Libby. And her temper, which had been banked for 4 months like a coal under ash, started to rise. It rose till the chains got hot. It rose till the chains got red. It rose till the iron softened and ran down her wrists like syrup. And Cinnamon Libby stood up in her cell, and she was so angry that she ground her teeth. And I mean ground them, friend, like a millstone on wheat. And her teeth came out, all of them, everyone. And she spat them into her hand and looked at them, 32 pearls in a palm full of blood. "Huh," she said. She put the teeth in her pocket. She walked through the cell door. The door, mind you, the iron door. She walked through it like a curtain. And she walked up the stairs, and she walked out of Dover Castle, and she walked all the way back to Trenton, 300 miles, on bare feet. Behind her in every town the women came pouring out of their houses again, and this time they were not laughing, they were quiet. That was worse. She got to Trenton Castle on a Sunday morning. The drawbridge was down. The guards saw her coming, and they laid down their pikes, because they'd heard, and because they could see her face. She walked across the bridge. She walked through the gate. She walked up the steps. She walked into the throne room, and Charles the Lukewarm was sitting on his throne eating an orange. He saw her. He dropped the orange. "Cinnamon Libby," he said, "I can explain." "Charles," she said, "open your mouth. "What?" "Open your mouth." He did, because there was something in her voice that did not allow for any other choice. She reached into her pocket. She took out her teeth, her own 32 teeth that she'd ground out in her cell in Dover, and she pressed them up into his gums, one by one, where his own teeth were. Not gentle, not quick, one by one. And she said, "These are mine. You wear them. You walk around wearing my teeth till the day you die, so that every time you bite an apple, every time you kiss your wife, every time you smile at a baby, you remember whose mouth those came out of and why." Then she punched him. Once, square, and every single tooth of his went flying out of his head. He fell off the throne. She sat down on it. "I'm queen now," she said to the room. Nobody argued. "Cinnamon Libby," said Maggie on the phone, very softly. "Oh, sweetheart." "I know, Maggie," said Libby. "I know. Now you'd think that's the end. It's not." The other kings got nervous. A peasant girl had taken a throne by walking through a door. The Empress of New York remembered that paper she'd signed and decided she didn't like it. The King of Pennsylvania, who was Charles the Lukewarm's brother-in-law, declared a holy war. The King of Delaware, who'd held her in chains, declared another holy war on top of the first one. They marched on Trenton together, 3 armies, 60,000 men, and they took the castle in a week because Libby let them, because Libby had a feeling about how this needed to end. They put her on a pyre in the courtyard. They piled the wood, oak and pine and birch, dry as bone. They poured oil on it. They tied her to the stake with chains they'd had specially made, cold iron, blessed iron, iron from a meteor that fell in 1842. They wanted to be sure. The 3 kings stood on the castle balcony to watch. Charles the Lukewarm was not there. Charles the Lukewarm was hiding in a barn in Hopewell, and that's where he stayed. The crowd in the courtyard was silent. The women stood at the front. They did not cry. They had stopped crying months ago. A herald lit the torch. He walked to the pyre. He put the torch to the kindling. The kindling caught, the wood caught, the oil caught. And Cinnamon Libby, chained to the stake in the middle of a fire so hot it cracked the cobblestones, did not catch. Her dress didn't burn. Her hair didn't burn. The skin on her arms didn't even pink up. She stood there in the middle of a roaring blaze, and she looked up at the 3 kings on the balcony, and she smiled, and her smile was empty of teeth. She'd never replace them, never would. And it was the most terrifying smile any of them had ever seen. "Y'all forget," she said, and her voice carried over the fire like a bell. "I've been on fire my whole life." The chains melted off her. She walked out of the pyre. The crowd parted. She walked up to the castle. She walked up the stairs. She walked onto the balcony. The 3 kings ran. She let them run. She let them go all the way down the stairs and out the gate and onto the turnpike. And she watched them go, and then she turned to the crowd in the courtyard, the women at the front, still silent, and she said, "All right, New Deal." They say Cinnamon Libby ruled New Jersey for 41 years, and she never wore teeth and she never wore a crown. She wore the skillet on her chest till the day she died. She rewrote every law in the kingdom, and she set them in stone in the courtyard at Trenton, where the pyre had been, and the stones are still there, and the writing is still legible. And the first law on the first stone reads, "No woman in this kingdom shall ever again be told to hush by anyone but herself." There's a small footnote on that one. It says, "Maggie accepted." And the story didn't stop at the New Jersey line. It couldn't. It spread up the coast and down the coast and over the mountains, and in every kingdom the women heard about Libby, they started looking at their own kings sideways. There were riots in Pennsylvania. There were riots in Virginia. There were riots in kingdoms Libby had never heard of, and in every one of them, somewhere in the crowd, was a woman with a cast-iron skillet she hadn't owned the week before. They did not all win, but they all rode. When she finally died, at 104, the phone rang one last time. "Cinnamon Libby," said Mickey. Come on home. I got some notes, said Libby. We know, said Kat. We've been keeping a list, said Mickey. Sweetheart, said Maggie. Hush, come inside. We got time. And she did. And they did. That, friends, is the gospel truth, or near enough to it that the difference don't matter. And if you ever drive the turnpike at sundown, northbound, just past exit 7A, when the sky over the pine barrens turns the color of cinnamon dipped in cayenne, roll your window down. Listen close. You might hear a phone ring. Don't pick it up unless you're ready.
Once Upon a Tall Tale is a production of Static Oracle Press. All stories are presented as recovered from the archive of folk narrative. Names, places, and details have been preserved as catalogued. Their accuracy is the responsibility of the original source, not the press. Nothing in this episode is intended as a statement of fact about any living person, identifiable location, or actual event. Where a story resembles something real, that resemblance belongs to the story, not to us. Static Oracle Press. Systems, stories, signals.